Zektar moved his six-clawed fingers across the datapad, reading the same files he had looked at 1,000 times before. The old Kralian's red eyes were tired, but he could not stop searching. Something was wrong with the official history, and after 30 years as the galaxy's chief archivist, he knew lies when he saw them. The files all said the same thing. Humans had been relocated for the good of the galaxy 50 years ago. They were too violent, too unpredictable. The Galactic Council had moved them to safer places where they could not hurt anyone. It was a mercy, the records claimed. But Zektar had been there. He remembered the human colonies. He remembered their cities full of art and music. He remembered human children playing with Kralian younglings in the parks of New Geneva. These were not the actions of a violent species. The archivist's office was deep in the council building on Nexus Prime. Few people came here anymore. Most citizens of the galaxy were happy to forget about humans. Life was easier when you did not think about uncomfortable truths. Zektar opened another file, one marked with the highest security levels. His claws trembled as he entered his access codes. What he found made his blood run cold. Terra Nova Station had been the largest human settlement outside Earth's solar system. 2.3 million humans lived there, along with 500,000 aliens who had chosen to live among them. The station was a marvel of cooperation between species. Humans had built it with Nexari technology, Vorthak mental coordination, and Kralian engineering. The official report said Terra Nova was evacuated peacefully before the humans were relocated. But the classified files told a different story. Fleet Admiral Korvex had commanded the operation. His personal logs were still in the files, hidden behind layers of encryption. Zektar read the words with growing horror. Day 1. Surrounded Terra Nova Station with joint fleet. Humans show no signs of surrender. They actually think we are here to negotiate. Day 3. Began bombing civilian areas. Humans finally understand this is not a negotiation. Their defense systems are surprisingly effective. Day 7. Station shields finally collapsed. Ordered ground assault. Take no prisoners. Day 9. Operation complete. No survivors detected. Station destroyed. Prepared cover story for council records. Zektar's hands shook as he read more files. Similar attacks had happened at dozens of human colonies. The galaxy's 3 most powerful species, the Vorthak with their mind powers, the Kralians with their armies, and the Nexari with their technology, had worked together to wipe out humanity. But why? The answer was in another set of files marked Council Threat Assessment, Human Problem. The document was written by the Council's Intelligence Division 51 years ago. It painted a picture of humanity that terrified the ruling species. Humans were too good at making friends. They had no interest in dominating other species. Instead, they helped smaller, weaker civilizations develop their own technology and culture. Human colonies welcomed refugees from across the galaxy. They shared their discoveries freely. Worse yet, human ideas were spreading. Concepts like equal rights for all species and government by the people were taking root in worlds that had been ruled by the same families for thousands of years. Some planets were even asking to leave the Galactic Council and join the human Commonwealth instead. The final report was clear. Humans represent an existential threat to current galactic order. Their ideology of equality and cooperation undermines traditional hierarchy. Recommend immediate action before human influence becomes impossible to contain. So they had acted. The 3 ruling species had divided human technology and territory between themselves. They told the galaxy that humans had been saved from their own violent nature. Most people believed it because it was easier than asking difficult questions. Zektar sat back in his chair, feeling older than his 200 years. He had spent decades helping to maintain the lie. Every time someone asked about humans, he had given them the official story. He had been part of the cover-up. A sound from his communication device made him jump. Someone was trying to reach him on an emergency channel. Zektar accepted the call. Commander Thale Nexus appeared on his screen. The young Nexari officer looked frightened. "Archive Chief, we need you at the Defense Center immediately. We have a situation." "What kind of situation?" "We are picking up signals from the Outer Rim, the dead zones beyond the spiral arm." Zektar frowned. Nothing lived out there. The region had no planets, no resources, no reason for anyone to go there. "What kind of signals?" "Old Earth languages." "Human languages. But the technology signature is impossible. It is more advanced than anything we have. The old Kralian felt his heart start beating faster. What did the signal say? Commander Thale's voice was barely a whisper. They say we remember, we return. Time to settle the score. Zektar closed his files and stood up. His legs felt weak, but he forced himself to move. As he walked through the halls of the council building, he saw other officials rushing around with worried faces. News was already spreading. In the defense center, dozens of officers worked at their stations. The main screen showed a map of the galaxy with red dots appearing at the edge of known space. Each dot represented a signal source. How many? Zektar asked. We count over 3,000 individual sources, Commander Thale replied, all moving inward toward inhabited systems. How long until they reach council space? At their current speed, maybe 6 weeks. But sir, that speed should be impossible. Nothing can travel that fast through hyperspace. Zektar looked at the screen and felt a chill run through his body. For 50 years, the galaxy had lived with a lie. They had told themselves that humans were gone, scattered and forgotten. They had divided up human worlds and pretended it was justice. But what if the humans had not died? What if they had survived out there in the dark spaces between the stars? What if 50 years of exile had changed them into something the galaxy had never seen before? The old archivist thought about the files he had just read. 2.3 million dead at Terra Nova Station alone, millions more across dozens of worlds. If humans were coming back, they would remember what had been done to them. Commander, Zektar said quietly, I need to speak with the council immediately. There are things they need to know about what really happened 50 years ago. Sir? The humans we thought we destroyed. I do not think they are as dead as we hoped. On the screen, more red dots appeared at the edge of space. Whatever was coming had been waiting a long time for this moment. The galaxy was about to learn that some deaths could never be forgotten, and some species were very, very good at holding grudges. The council chamber had not been this full in decades. Representatives from all 3 ruling species sat at their curved tables, whispering in worried voices. The massive room felt smaller somehow, as if the walls were pressing in on everyone inside. Commander Thale stood at the center podium, his blue skin pale with fear. The young Nexari officer had been monitoring space for 10 years, but nothing had prepared him for this. The signals are getting stronger, he reported. We now detect over 5,000 sources. They are all broadcasting the same message in rotation. Human languages from old Earth. English, Mandarin, Spanish, Arabic. Languages that have been dead for 50 years. High Counselor Vexthara of the Vorthak leaned forward. Her large head was smooth and white, with black eyes that could read minds across star systems. But today those eyes showed something no one had ever seen before. Fear. My telepaths cannot reach them, she said in her musical voice. Whatever approaches us, their minds are shielded. We sense nothing. Empty space where ships should be. Impossible, growled War Chief Braktos of the Kralians. The massive red-skinned warrior stood nearly 3 meters tall, with armor that had been worn in 100 battles. No species can hide from Vorthak mind touch. You are mistaken. I am not mistaken, Vexthara replied coldly. Either these ships carry no living beings or what? Or they have learned to shield their thoughts better than we ever thought possible. Prime Engineer Zalkun of the Nexari activated a holographic display above the table. The blue-skinned scientist's forearms moved quickly over his controls, bringing up detailed scans of the approaching signals. The energy signatures make no sense, he said. These ships are using power sources we cannot identify. Their drive systems appear to bend space-time in ways our physics says should not work. Perhaps they found new technology in the outer rim, suggested one of the junior counselors. There is nothing in the outer rim, Zalkun replied firmly. We sent survey ships there after the human relocation. Empty space for thousands of light years. No planets, no resources, no way to survive. Then how are they alive? Demanded Braktos. The question hung in the air like poison gas. Everyone knew the answer, but no one wanted to say it out loud. Finally, Zektar spoke from his position near the wall. The old archivist had been silent during the meeting, but now all eyes turned to him. Because we did not kill them all. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Representatives shouted denials and accusations. Braktos slammed his armored fist on his table, making the metal ring like a bell. The relocation was peaceful, the war chief roared. Humans were moved to safe worlds where they could not threaten galactic peace. That is a lie, Sektar said calmly. He activated his own datapad and sent files to every screen in the chamber. I have spent weeks reviewing the classified archives. Would you like me to read Admiral Korvex's personal logs about Terra Nova Station? The chamber fell silent. High Counselor Vexathara's mental abilities might be blocked by the approaching ships, but she could read the minds of everyone in this room clearly enough. He knows, she whispered. The archivist knows everything. Sektar began reading from the files. His voice was steady and calm, but each word hit the listeners like a physical blow. He described the attacks on human colonies, the bombardment of civilian targets, the ground assaults that took no prisoners. When he finished, the chamber remained silent for a long moment. So, said a voice from the back of the room, they are coming for revenge. Everyone turned to see Dr. Elena Vasquez stepping into the light. The human woman was small and gray-haired, wearing the white coat of a council research scientist. She was one of perhaps a dozen humans who had been off-world during the attacks and had been allowed to integrate into galactic society afterward. Dr. Vasquez, Vexathara said carefully, we did not expect to see you here. I was invited, Elena replied, holding up a communication device. By them. She activated the device and a new signal filled the chamber. This one was different from the automated messages they had been receiving. This one was personal. Elena, said a voice speaking perfect English, I hope you are well, old friend. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Expeditionary Force. Yes, we survived. And yes, we remember everything. Elena's eyes filled with tears as she heard the voice of someone she had thought dead for 50 years. The council is probably listening to this message. The voice continued. Good. They should hear what I have to say. We are coming home, Elena. Not as conquerors, but as judges. The galaxy will finally learn the truth about what happened to our people. The message paused, then continued in a harder tone. To the council members who ordered our genocide, you took our homes, our families, our future. You scattered our survivors to the void and told the galaxy we were monsters. But you made one mistake. You left us alive, and humans are very good at surviving impossible things. Bractos stood up from his chair. If they want to fight, they will get one. The Kralian fleet will— Sit down, War Chief, Elena said quietly. Her voice was soft, but something in her tone made the huge warrior pause. What do you know? Vexathara asked, her mental powers pressing against Elena's mind. Elena smiled sadly. I know that 50 years ago you thought you were destroying a weak species of primitives. But humans were never weak. We were just young. You gave us 50 years to grow up. She gestured to the display showing the approaching signals. You threw us into the deep dark between the stars with nothing but broken ships and dying technology. Any other species would have perished in months. But humans, we adapt, we learn. We become stronger. Impossible, whispered Zalkun. No species could develop advanced technology without resources, without infrastructure. You are thinking like Nixari, Elena replied, always depending on your factories and databases. Humans think differently. We make tools from whatever we can find. We turn problems into solutions. You gave us the greatest teacher of all, absolute necessity. The chamber's main display suddenly changed without warning. Commander Thale frantically worked his controls, but the screen would not respond to his commands. Good evening, said a new voice. The image showed a middle-aged human woman in a uniform none of them recognized. Her dark hair was streaked with gray, and her brown eyes held the confidence of someone who had faced impossible odds and won. I am Admiral Sarah Chen. 50 years ago, your people tried to exterminate mine. You killed millions of innocent civilians and told the galaxy it was for their own good. Today we return to settle that debt. Bractos reached for his weapon, but Elena shook her head. I would not, she said gently. Sarah, show them. The display changed to show space near the edge of Kralian territory, where there had been empty void moments before. Massive shapes now appeared. Ships unlike anything in galactic records materialized as if stepping out of invisible doorways. The vessels were beautiful and terrible, flowing like liquid metal, but clearly more solid than any known material. They moved without visible engines, bending space around them like living creatures swimming through reality itself. We are not here for conquest, Admiral Chen continued. We are here for justice. The galaxy deserves to know the truth about what you did to us, and you deserve to face the consequences of your actions. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. High Counselor Vexithara was the first to speak. How many ships? Elena checked her communication device. The advanced diplomatic fleet. About 10,000 vessels. Diplomatic fleet? Salkin's voice cracked. Oh yes, Elena smiled. Sarah was always the peaceful one. The real military fleet is still hidden out there, making sure this conversation stays civil. War Chief Braktos sat down heavily in his chair. For the first time in his long career, the greatest warrior in Kralian history looked genuinely afraid. The humans had returned, and they were nothing like the species the galaxy remembered. The human fleet appeared at the edge of Kralian space like a dream becoming real. One moment there was empty void. The next moment, thousands of impossible ships hung in the darkness like silver tears in the fabric of space itself. Captain Vorthak of the Kralian Defense Force watched his instruments with growing disbelief. His massive battle cruiser, the Iron Fang, had been designed to fight entire fleets. Its weapons could crack planets and its shields could stop Starkiller missiles, but the readings his sensors were giving him made no sense at all. "Sir?" His weapons officer reported in a shaking voice. "I cannot get target locks. The enemy ships seem to exist in multiple dimensions at once." "What does that mean?" Vorthak demanded. "I do not know, sir. Our computers say the targets are there but also not there, like they are real and not real at the same time." On every world in the galaxy, beings stopped what they were doing to watch their communication screens. The human fleet was broadcasting on every frequency, using every technology, reaching every device capable of receiving signals. There was no way to block the transmission, no way to stop it, no way to ignore it. Admiral Sarah Chen appeared on screens across 1,000 worlds. Behind her, the bridge of her flagship showed technology that seemed grown rather than built. Walls curved like living tissue but gleamed like metal. Control surfaces responded to thought rather than touch. "Citizens of the galaxy," she began, her voice carrying clearly in dozens of languages. "My name is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Expeditionary Force. 50 years ago, your leaders told you that humanity had been relocated for the good of all. Today, you will learn the truth." The image changed to show archived footage from human colonies, children playing in parks under alien suns, humans and aliens working together to build cities that sparkled like jewels, art galleries where creatures from dozens of worlds shared their cultures. "This was our life before," Admiral Chen continued. "We were not conquerors or destroyers. We were builders, teachers, friends to any who would accept friendship. We asked for nothing but the chance to live in peace among the stars." The footage shifted to show attack fleets approaching human settlements, Kralian warships, Vorthak mind control vessels, and Nexari technology platforms working together in perfect coordination. "This is what your leaders did to us." The screens showed the bombardment of Terra Nova Station, civilian areas erupting in flames, evacuation ships being shot down as they tried to escape. Children's playgrounds turned into craters of melted glass. Across the galaxy, beings watched in horror as the truth was finally revealed. The human colonies had not been peacefully relocated. They had been slaughtered. 2.3 million humans died at Terra Nova. Admiral Chen's voice continued over the images of destruction. Similar attacks happened at 47 other colonies. Your leaders divided our territory between themselves and told you it was justice. The transmission showed lists of the dead. Names scrolled by too fast to read, but the numbers kept climbing. Men, women, children, elders. An entire species nearly wiped out in a coordinated campaign of genocide. On Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council watched the broadcast with growing panic. High Counselor Vexithara tried desperately to break the transmission using her mental powers, but it was like trying to grasp smoke. "Can we block this?" War Chief Braktos demanded. "Impossible," Prime Engineer Zalkun replied. "They are using our own communication networks against us. Every relay station, every satellite, every personal device. The signal is coming from everywhere at once." The broadcast continued, showing the aftermath of the attacks. Scattered human survivors fleeing into the void in damaged ships. Families torn apart, sent to die in the empty spaces between stars. "But we did not die," Admiral Chen said, and now the image showed something that made the council members lean forward in fear. The camera pulled back to reveal not just Admiral Chen's ship, but thousands of others stretching to the horizon. Each vessel was unique, beautiful, and clearly built with technology far beyond anything the galaxy had seen. "You threw us into the void with nothing but broken ships and dying dreams. Any other species would have perished. But humans adapt. We survive, we learn, and when we are pushed to the edge of extinction, We become something new. The ships in the display began to move, not with the crude thrust of conventional engines, but like living things swimming through space. They phased in and out of visibility, appearing in multiple places at once, defying every law of physics the galaxy thought it knew. We spent 50 years in the deep dark, beyond your reach. We learned to harvest energy from quantum foam. We taught ourselves to think in dimensions you cannot imagine. We became what we needed to become to survive. On 1,000 worlds, the population watched in silent awe. The humans had not just survived. They had evolved into something beyond current understanding. But we are not here for conquest, Admiral Chen continued, and her voice became gentler. We are not our enemies. We do not wage war on the innocent. The display changed to show human ships taking positions around smaller, weaker worlds. Not attacking positions, but protective ones. To the species who have suffered under the current system, to the worlds that have been exploited and ignored, we offer our protection. To the refugees fleeing persecution, we offer sanctuary. To all beings who dream of a galaxy built on cooperation rather than domination, we offer hope. Then her voice hardened again, and the camera focused on her face. But to those who ordered our genocide, to those who built their power on our graves, we offer something different. Justice. The transmission shifted to show 3 platforms appearing in space near major council worlds. Each platform was the size of a small moon, but made of the same flowing material as the human ships. We challenged the leaders of the 3 ruling species to trials of single combat. Vorthak, Kralian, Nexari, choose your champions. If you win, we will withdraw beyond the galactic rim and never return. If we win, you will face the consequences of your crimes. War Chief Braktos stood up from his chair in the council chamber. They dare challenge Kralian honor? I will face their champion myself. Wait, Vexthera said urgently. This could be a trap. We know nothing about what they have become. I know enough, Braktos growled. Humans were weak before. They may have new toys, but they are still the same soft species we drove from the galaxy. Admiral Chen's image smiled sadly. We know you will accept. Pride was always your weakness. The trials will take place in 3 days on neutral ground. The entire galaxy will witness what happens when justice finally comes home. The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy in stunned silence. On Earth's former colonies, now occupied by other species, beings looked up at the stars with new understanding. The official history they had been taught was a lie. Humanity had not been relocated. It had been murdered. In the refugee camps on the outer worlds, aliens who had fled persecution whispered to each other about the human offer of protection. For the first time in decades, they felt hope. And in the council chambers on Nexus Prime, the 3 most powerful species in the galaxy faced a terrible truth. The humans they had thought destroyed had returned, and they were no longer the weak civilization that could be bullied and scattered. What have we done? Whispered Zalkun. Elena Vasquez, still standing in the chamber, answered quietly. You taught us that the galaxy was not safe for peaceful species. So we stopped being peaceful. She looked at the council members with sad eyes. 50 years ago, you could have been our friends. We would have shared everything we had, everything we learned. Instead, you chose to be our enemies. And now? Asked Vexthera. Elena smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Now you get to learn what humans are like when we stop trying to be nice. Outside the chamber windows, the first human ships appeared in orbit around Nexus Prime. They hung in the sky like impossible dreams, beautiful and terrible and utterly alien. The galaxy trembled and waited to see what justice would look like when it finally came home. The neutral station hung in empty space between star systems, built by the humans in just 2 days. It was impossible architecture, walls that curved through dimensions that should not exist, powered by energies that made Nexari scientists weep with envy. Every being in the galaxy with access to communication technology was watching. The trials would be broadcast live, with no delays, no editing, no way for the council to control the narrative. Tribune Kess of the Alterian Republic sat in her small apartment, her 4 eyes fixed on the screen. Like billions of others, she had grown up believing the official story about human relocation. Now she knew better. Now she understood why her people had never been allowed to develop beyond basic technology. The council wanted no competition. The first trial was about to begin. High Counselor Vexithera of the Vorthak, floated in the center of the arena, her pale form glowing with mental energy. She was the greatest telepath of her generation, able to control minds across star systems, read thoughts through quantum barriers, and project mental force strong enough to shatter starship hulls. Across from her stood a human woman who looked ordinary in every way. Maria Santos was middle-aged, brown-skinned, wearing simple clothes. She carried no weapons, no technology, no armor. To most observers, she looked like a victim waiting to be slaughtered. "Citizens of the galaxy," Admiral Chen's voice spoke over the broadcast. "The first trial tests the power of the mind. The Vorthak claimed to be the ultimate telepathic species. They used their abilities to coordinate the genocide of our people. Today we will see if mental power without wisdom is truly strength." Vexithara struck first. Her mental assault was invisible but devastating. A psychic storm designed to shatter Maria's mind like glass. The attack was strong enough to kill a dozen normal beings instantly. Maria did not even blink. "Impossible," Vexithara whispered. She tried again, pouring more power into her assault. The air around her shimmered with psychic energy. The metal walls of the arena began to vibrate under the strain. Maria smiled gently and spoke for the first time. "50 years ago, your people attacked our colonies while we slept. You used telepathy to paralyze our defenders, to make our people stand still while they were murdered. Did you think we would not learn to protect ourselves?" She took a step forward. Vexithara's eyes widened in shock as she felt something she had never experienced before, her mental powers being blocked by shields she could not even detect. "The void between stars is full of energy," Maria continued conversationally. "Most species think it is empty, but they are wrong. There are currents of thought, rivers of consciousness that flow between the galaxies. We learn to swim in them." Maria reached out with her mind and Vexithara gasped. The human's mental touch was gentle but utterly overwhelming. It was like being embraced by a star. "We do not use telepathy as a weapon," Maria said. "We use it as it was meant to be used. To understand, to heal, to connect." She showed Vexithara visions of the human exile. Not the sanitized version the Council had created, but the truth. Families dying in the cold of space. Children crying for parents who would never come home. Survivors clinging to life in damaged ships refusing to give up hope. "Do you understand now?" Maria asked softly. "You attacked us because you feared we would unite the galaxy against you. But you made one mistake. You left us alive to learn what unity really means." Vexithara fell to her knees, overwhelmed by the depth of human mental evolution. Her own telepathic abilities, which she had always seen as tools of domination, seemed crude and primitive by comparison. "I yield," she whispered. Maria knelt beside her and placed a gentle hand on the Vorthak's shoulder. "Your people can learn too if you choose. Telepathy is not meant for control. It is meant for compassion." The first trial was over. The greatest telepath in the galaxy had been defeated not by superior force but by superior understanding. The second trial began immediately. War Chief Braktos of the Kralians entered the arena like a force of nature. 3 meters tall, covered in battle scars, carrying weapons that had conquered 100 worlds. His armor was legendary, forged from the hull of the first ship he had captured, powered by the fusion cores of enemies he had defeated. Facing him was Captain Marcus Webb, a human who looked like he belonged in a library rather than a battlefield, thin, pale, wearing no armor and carrying no visible weapons. "This is a joke," Braktos growled. "Send me a real warrior, not this soft thing." Marcus smiled politely. "I am what humanity has become, War Chief. Perhaps that should concern you more than it does." Braktos charged with a roar that shook the station's walls. His massive warhammer could crush tank armor, and his speed was impossible for something so large. The blow he aimed at Marcus would have vaporized any normal being. Marcus was not there when the hammer fell. He appeared beside Braktos, moving in a way that made the watching galaxy gasp. The human had not dodged. He had stepped sideways through a dimension that should not exist. 50 years ago, your fleet surrounded our colonies, Marcus said calmly as Braktos spun to face him. You used overwhelming force against civilians. Did you think we would not learn to fight back? The war chief attacked again, this time with a plasma rifle that fired bolts of star-hot energy. Each shot was perfectly aimed, each one powerful enough to melt through starship hulls. Marcus danced between the bolts like they were standing still. He moved through space the way a fish swims through water, flowing around obstacles instead of meeting them head-on. Humans discovered something interesting in the void. He continued conversationally while avoiding weapons that should have been impossible to dodge. Combat is not about strength. It is about adaptation. Marcus reached out and touched Braktos's rifle. The weapon simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not damaged, just gone as if it had never been made. Your people worship power, Marcus said as the war chief drew a sword that hummed with energy. But power without purpose is just noise. The sword strikes came faster than thought, each one capable of cutting through diamond. Braktos was a master warrior with centuries of experience. His techniques had been perfected in 1,000 battles. Marcus made them all look like a child playing with toys. He did not block the strikes or parry them. Instead, he moved in harmony with them, turning the war chief's own momentum against him. Every attack became an opportunity. Every assault became a step in an elegant dance. We learned to fight by surviving impossible odds, Marcus explained, as he gently redirected a strike that would have split mountains. When you have nothing, you must use everything. When you are weak, you must be clever. When you face extinction, you must become something new. Braktos found himself spinning through the air, his own strength used to throw him across the arena. He crashed into a wall hard enough to crack the metal. I do not understand, the war chief gasped as he struggled to stand. How can you be so strong? I am not strong, Marcus replied. Strength is what you use when you have failed to find a better way. I am something more dangerous than strong. I am adaptable. The final exchange lasted less than a second. Braktos made one last desperate charge, putting all his legendary power into a final strike. Marcus flowed around it like water, touched the war chief's shoulder, and Braktos collapsed unconscious. Victory through harmony, Marcus said to the watching galaxy. Your people can learn this too if you choose peace over domination. The third trial was different. Prime Engineer Zalkan of the Nexari brought no weapons or warriors. Instead, he brought the greatest technological challenge his species could devise, a puzzle box containing the compressed knowledge of 10,000 years of Nexari science. Solve this, he said to the human representative, Dr. Kenji Nakamura. If your species has truly advanced, prove it by understanding our greatest achievements. Kenji was a small, elderly man who looked like someone's grandfather. He examined the puzzle box with gentle hands and curious eyes. Interesting, he said after a moment. Your people have learned to store information in quantum crystalline matrices. Very efficient for a species that thinks in only 4 dimensions. Zalkun's forearms trembled. Only 4 dimensions? That is all that exist. Oh no, Kenji smiled sadly. There are so many more. We learned to use them all when we had nothing else left. He touched the puzzle box and it opened like a flower blooming. The compressed knowledge flowed out in streams of light, but instead of overwhelming the human, it seemed to please him. Your mathematics are beautiful, Kenji said as he absorbed 10,000 years of Nexari science in seconds, but limited. You built walls around your thinking. We learned to think without walls. He reached into empty air and pulled out a device that should not have been possible to create. It hummed with power that made Nexari instruments scream warnings. This is a quantum rewriter, Kenji explained gently. It can reorganize matter at the subatomic level. We use them to turn asteroids into starships, to heal injuries that should be fatal, to create whatever we need from whatever we have. Zalkun stared at the impossible device. His species had dreamed of such technology for millennia. How? He whispered. By learning that the universe is much stranger and more wonderful than we thought, Kenji replied. Your people can learn too. We would be happy to teach you. The trials were over. The 3 greatest species in the galaxy had been defeated not by superior force, but by superior 3 months after the trials. The galaxy was a different place. Zektar stood in his archive chamber, but now it was no longer hidden deep in the council building. The walls had been removed, the security barriers taken down. The truth belonged to everyone, Admiral Chen had declared, and the humans had technology that made hiding information impossible anyway. The old Kralian was not alone anymore. Beings from dozens of species came to study the real history of their galaxy. They read the files that had been classified for centuries. They learned about the genocides, the cover-ups, the lies that had kept the 3 ruling species in power. Archive Chief, said a voice behind him. Zektar turned to see Dr. Elena Vasquez approaching with another human he did not recognize. "Dr. Vasquez," he replied with a small bow. "How can I help you?" "I want you to meet someone. This is Dr. James Chen, Admiral Sarah's younger brother." The human man was elderly with white hair and gentle eyes. He carried a data device that hummed with the strange technology humans now used. "Chief Zektar," James said with a warm smile, "my sister tells me you were the one who preserved the truth all these years. Even when it was dangerous, even when it would have been easier to forget." "I did what any honest archivist would do," Zektar replied modestly. "No," James shook his head. "You did what a hero would do, and heroes deserve to see their work completed." He activated his device, and suddenly the archive chamber was filled with light. New files appeared on every screen, but these were different from the classified records Zektar was used to seeing. "What is this?" the archivist asked. "The rest of the story," Elena replied. "What happened to us out there in the void? How we survived, how we grew, how we learned to become more than we were." The files showed the human exodus in detail. Broken ships limping through empty space, carrying families with nothing but hope. Many had died in those first terrible months, but the survivors had done something remarkable. They had refused to give up. Zektar read accounts of humans teaching themselves to extract energy from quantum foam when their fusion reactors failed. Of children learning to navigate by reading the gravitational currents between galaxies. Of artists creating beautiful sculptures from asteroid debris while their people struggled to find food. "We had no factories," James explained as the files scrolled past. "No infrastructure, no industrial base. Everything we needed we had to create from nothing. It forced us to think in completely new ways." The records showed human communities learning to work together like they never had before. With death always one mistake away, there was no room for the old human weaknesses of greed or pride. Every person became precious. Every idea became important. "Most species would have died," Elena said quietly, "but humans are stubborn." "We are also curious," James added with a laugh. "When we found ourselves in the deep void, instead of just trying to survive, we started exploring. We discovered things out there that the galaxy never imagined." The files showed images that made Zektar's mind reel. Vast structures floating in the darkness between galaxies, not built by any known species, but by civilizations so ancient their names were forgotten. The humans had found these ruins and learned from them. "There are others," James continued, "species that evolved beyond the need for planets, for physical form, for the limitations that keep most life trapped in single galaxies. They had been waiting out there for someone worthy of their knowledge. And they chose humans?" Zektar asked. "They chose the species that had learned that survival was not enough," Elena replied, "that had learned to remain compassionate even after suffering terrible injustice. That had learned to build instead of destroy." The archive showed the first human settlements in the deep void, not the crude survival camps Zektar had expected, but beautiful cities that moved through space like living organisms, communities where human children grew up alongside artificial intelligences and energy beings from dimensions beyond normal understanding. "We learned to think in ways no single galaxy species ever had to," James explained. "When you have nothing but empty space and quantum foam to work with, you learn that reality is much more flexible than most beings realize." Zektar studied images of human technology that seemed to grow rather than being manufactured, ships that were more like living creatures than machines. Tools that responded to thought and emotion rather than crude physical controls. "But the most important thing we learned," Elena said softly, "was that intelligence without wisdom is just clever destruction." We had watched our own species nearly destroy Earth with wars and pollution. We had seen the three ruling species turn the galaxy into a prison of fear. We decided to choose a different path. The files showed human schools where children learned not just science and engineering, but philosophy and ethics. Where the first question about any new technology was not, "Can we build it?" but "Should we build it?" When we decided to return to the galaxy, James continued, it was not for revenge. It was because we realized that the other species were trapped in the same cycle of fear and domination that had nearly destroyed us. We came back to offer them what we had learned, that there is a better way. Zektar looked up from the files. "And now? What happens to the three ruling species?" Elena and James exchanged glances. "That depends on them," Elena replied. We have made our offer. Some are accepting it. She activated another display that showed changes happening across the galaxy. On Vorthak worlds, telepaths were learning to use their abilities for healing instead of control. They worked with human teachers to develop mental techniques that brought peace instead of domination. Kralian warriors were enrolling in human military academies, but these schools taught strategy and defense rather than conquest. War Chief Braktos himself had been among the first to apply, eager to learn the combat techniques that had defeated him so completely. Nexari scientists were collaborating with human researchers, their advanced databases combining with human creativity to develop technologies that seemed like magic. Prime Engineer Zalkan had publicly declared that the next 1,000 years of Nexari development would be guided by human principles of ethical innovation. Of course, not everyone is happy with the changes, James admitted. Some of the old guards still dream of the days when they could rule through fear. What about them? Sektar asked. Elena's expression grew sad but firm. They are free to leave. We have given them ships and supplies. They can find empty systems where they can live as they choose. But they cannot stay in civilized space if they refuse to be civilized. And if they try to cause trouble, James smiled, but there was steel in his eyes. The diplomatic fleet you saw was just the beginning. The galaxy is now protected by beings who learn to survive the impossible. Troublemakers will find that they are very much outmatched. Zektar nodded slowly. He had spent his life maintaining archives, but now he was watching history being written in real time. What about the smaller species? He asked. The ones who were never part of the ruling council? They're the most important part of our new galaxy, Elena replied warmly. For too long they were ignored or exploited. Now they have protection, resources, and most importantly, a voice in how things are run. The files showed the formation of the new Galactic Compact, a cooperative government where every species had representation, where decisions were made by consensus rather than force, where disputes were settled by arbitration rather than war. It is not perfect, James admitted. Nothing involving this many different species could be perfect. But it is fair, and it is based on the principle that every form of life has value. Zektar looked around his archive, now filled with truth instead of lies, with hope instead of fear. And the humans? He asked. What do you get from all this? Elena and James both smiled. We get what we always wanted, Elena replied. A galaxy where our children can grow up safely, where different species can learn from each other instead of fearing each other, where the universe becomes a little bit brighter because we were here. We learned something important during our exile, James added. True strength comes not from the power to destroy, but from the wisdom to create. The galaxy gave us a terrible gift when it tried to exterminate us. It taught us what really matters. Through the windows of the archive, Zektar could see human ships in orbit around Nexus Prime. But they were not warships now. They were research vessels, hospital ships, transport craft carrying supplies to worlds that needed help. The galaxy trembled when we returned, Elena said quietly, but not because we came as conquerors. It trembled because we came offering something the ruling species could never provide, hope for a better future. Zektar began updating his files one final time. Not with classified secrets or hidden atrocities, but with the story of how a galaxy learned to heal from the wounds of its own making. In the record, he wrote, On this day, the age of fear ended. Not because the strong were defeated, but because the wise chose to teach rather than punish. The humans returned not as angels of vengeance, but as teachers of possibility. And the galaxy, trembling with the weight of its own potential, chose to learn. He paused, then added a final note. The children of tomorrow will inherit a universe where,